There was this one thing you said in an interview, and we were talking about this earlier, this idea of written versus being able to explain.
Correct.
And there was this great point you made that I think people wouldn't recognize with the amount of success you've had, the hits you've had. You know, I think people want to know about you and learn about you. But you said, when you come from where I come from and everybody doesn't get those breaks, that luck, you start to question, why am I successful in life? Why did I go this way and everybody went that way? And I just thought that that was, you know, again, extremely humble and also representative of where you grew up, how you came up. Like, which way did everyone go and where did that luck begin for you?
You know, I think coming up in Newark, New Jersey, coming up in that environment and, you know, having, you know, when you're younger, you know, you're living life, you know, you're taking it a day at a time. You know, you're going to basketball practice, you're going to school, you know, you're going to church, you know, for me, it was, you know, taking a lot of trips to New York City, going on auditions at a really, really young age and just figuring out what that is. Having parents pretty aware, you know, and very present in my life, you know, growing up, you know, that was rare amongst my family, and amongst my friend group, you know, having both parents that was there and very present and aware of my environment as well. You know, you know, being told to look out for these things and make good choices, to be disciplined, to be focused on things, you know, get your schoolwork, you know, all the you know, the positives in growing up in an environment like that. And, you know, hats off to my parents and to sacrifice so much to make sure their kids, you know, were safe and grew up in, grew up in that environment. It ain't easy making ends meet, you know. Grew up very poor, but didn't feel like it, you know what I'm saying? It was very, you know, I think they did a good job at hiding those things, you know. I think as we get older, we look back, it was like, oh man, we went through that. Oh, that's why we slept in the kitchen that one time with the oven open, or that's when we stayed at grandma's house for like, you know, a couple of weeks when you know, so you get that reflection of how we kind of grew up. And I think for me, you know, always having a bigger purpose, I think, or just, you know, just that optimism, you know, that I was a big dreamer as a kid. And I think, you know, you start to not just to focus on just the work of it all, but since I was working such a young age, that's the thing that I can kind of point to of, you know, booking auditions and getting this job and traveling to this place and experiencing these things and coming back home with these experiences and not having a lot of people who could relate or could, you know, I could soundboard off of. And I think in feeling like that, you don't want to alienate those people, you know, and I think, and this is all, I guess, in hindsight, you don't share these stories as much. You know, maybe you should, because you don't want somebody to feel like inadequate or, you know, not being able to have that experience that you might have had. And I think, you know, that snowballs as you get older, and from stepping stone to stepping stone as I continue to be successful at a young age. You start to question, why am I being so successful? And the people that look just like me, that are right next to me in these everyday things, aren't necessarily doing that, or not choosing to, you know, just didn't have those options that were laid out to them. And I think you start to doubt yourself for whatever reason, or feel guilty for the things that you may or may not have, even though, you know, our parents were people of service, you know, block parties, or, you know, cooking church dinners, or, you know, whenever, you know, my house was the house that everybody came to at some point, whether we were going to get pizza that night or dad was going to take everybody camping or going to these things. Like, that was kind of my house within my neighborhood and community. And so I think for me, being a person of service, kind of, because, you know, it's kind of comes from how I was raised, and those are the examples that I knew growing up. I always felt lucky too. As you become more successful and you see less people look like you that are being successful in this realm, and you end up being the one guy that looks like me that's successful, or the couple guys or the usual suspects that you see in the audition room, or things of that nature, you know, you start to sometimes question why you. Now I feel as though it was my path, you know, it was my purpose. And spirituality, and growing up in a household that was very focused on, you know, church and spiritual and meditation, and just being aware of the world that we live in. You know, I felt I was destined for something, not knowing what that was, but just something.
Wow, yeah, and I mean, when I'm hearing that, it sounds like, I love what you said. You were like, you know, they hid we were poor and we didn't even see that. But this idea of like, you sound so, when I see you talk about your family, and for those of you watching, you can see it on Mike's face, but there's so much joy and there's bliss and there's like a happiness when you're looking back on that time. Like I can see it's a positive experience because of how you feel you've been loved and cared for and supported, even though the resources may not have been there or the access or opportunities. And I was wondering when I was listening to you, like, is there a memory or an experience from your childhood that you think defines who you are today? Like, was there a memory or a story that you have in your mind of an experience you went through that you think brings out maybe that service element or brings out that purposeful element?
And I think this bliss and this appreciation for how I grew up comes in hindsight. You know, like, you know, the first time you have a moment where you're like, pick up the phone, you know, one morning, you just call your mom and be like, yeah, thank you. I get it. And I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry for being that kid at some point. And I'm so sorry for not understanding. I totally get what you guys are going through. Sheesh. I love you guys, you know? Like you have those moments when you get older, you know, that you just can't really have that perspective when you were a kid. And I think, you know, I was very mischievous, you know, as well. And I think there were moments when my dad disciplined me, you know, for whatever whatever I did at that time. And then my mom would have a conversation with me around the why. And then being also forced or pushed and nudged into a space where you had to acknowledge your siblings also, you know, in that situation and the importance of family and what that means, you know. My parents have different upbringings, you know what I'm saying, from, you know, and different family structures growing up. But one thing they've always provided us with is just a sense of like family over everything, you know, and how important that is. What
was that switch for you that went from like, I don't deserve this, God, like I feel out of place, I'm lucky, to being like, no, actually now I see it as this was meant to be my path? Because I think a lot of people and a lot of our listeners will be there. Like a lot of people are like, they're making moves and maybe they're the first person in their family to go to college, or maybe they're the first person who started up a business and is an entrepreneur, or maybe one of our listeners is trying to break generational trauma and they're the first person to spot it. But then they all live in that space of like, can I do this? Like, am I the one to do this? And so what was it that made that switch from like, I'm not sure I'm the guy, but oh, it is my path?
It's the sum of all things leading up into that point. I think it's all the doubt. It's the imposter syndrome. It's the blessings that you can't really accept fully. And you listen to other people speak who are successful, or you see examples that you kind of feel connected to. Like, man, that kind of feels like me. Or what he just said or what she just said, I resonate with that. You know, I feel like that sometimes, you know. Other people who are looking at you saying, no, Mike, this is what you have. This is what you can be. This is what you are. Nah, that can't, no, that's too good. No, that ain't me, you know. Your own presence in a situation where you have to step back and look at yourself and be like, am I this guy right now? Like, oh man, there's a room full of people who showed up because of something I'm doing, and they're in service or in support of my idea, my thing. Okay, that looks and feels like I'm the guy. Okay, I'm in the industry where, you know, the success of your work and your art has been, you know, dictated and validated by other people's opinions, and whether those opinions are factual or projected on you from their own individual perspective. I think it was a combination of all those things, and I've always been curious and walked towards how do I make myself better? What are the things that I need, the tools that I need in order to improve myself, the way I think, how do I maximize myself, you know? So from, I think, getting an executive coach, you know, who talks to executives all day and you know, how to create healthy conversations, the right type of conversations to have as you're building a team around you. Because, you know, as you know, it's not just us. You know, we have an entire team of people that surround us that help us achieve our dreams and get the big idea done. You know, a spiritual advisor, a spiritual coach that I have who, you know, helps me do my energy work, my spiritual work, and help sift through the noise and find those things. And I think it wasn't until I had, roles that challenged my spirit and myself in a real way that in the weight and where the attention was so loud that it was, it was deafening, and it was, and I couldn't, see clearly. And, these champagne problems, you know what I'm saying? That we're blessed. So, but the weight is so heavy, and people sometimes think and they see what we have or what, what we're doing, and it's like, just be grateful, or just, what are you complaining about, and most people wouldn't be able to walk, a block in our shoes, with this stuff. Once you know better, you gotta almost do better. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I refuse to ignore it. I refuse to see it an opportunity that I had to change things and act like it didn't exist. And I think that was the thing for me that I was like, nah, I gotta, if that's my purpose, if that's my path, is to just see it, and I can see the pieces, and if I can just continue to do this, or if I stay down the pathway on that, and I might be able to make a big difference in my nephew's life, or my future children's, my future grandchildren's life, I gotta do that. Right as I was stepping into directing Creed 3, and the weight of that, and being the captain of the ship the first time, being captain of the ship in a, I've made movies before, I've done that. I know what that's like, but I've never ever been the director, the captain of the ship. And I think that responsibility, that pressure, that, I'm not a dad, but being able, everybody's looking to you for the answer, for the solve, for the leadership. And I think that really thrust me into a mindset of leadership that I never quite had the opportunity to do before.